Today we're going to be talking with Ben Baumer and Katherine Kinnaird, both from Smith College. Unfortunately, the person who does my lawn just showed up, so hopefully that sound won't come through, but I won't be talking for very long, so that's okay. All right, so if you don't know me, I'm Lee Johnson at Capital University. I host and moderate this every month. Just a couple of updates, what's new in the journal. We've had several articles come through in the last few weeks. One from Xiumin Lao toward an inclusive pedagogy and teaching coding, Scratch to R. And then one, especially for those of you who are starting to think about your fall classes, yes, it is coming soon. Designing a large online simulation-based introductory statistics course with Ella Berman, Erin Blankenship, and Sydney Brown. But there's several articles, so feel free to go to the website and check those out. Just so you know, because school is starting up in August and with JSM happening, we're not going to do a webinar in August, but we will do one in September, and we'll have details of that coming up here pretty soon. And then just a quick announcement from Cause. I made this announcement in the last webinar. Cause Research is doing a reading group every couple of weeks using the articles that were mentioned in Rob Gould's talk at ECOTS 2022. We actually had our first meeting last month, but that shouldn't stop you from joining. This is very open and welcoming. Our second meeting is actually tomorrow, July 20th at 2 p.m. And sorry, my clicking's, oh, what just happened there? My apologies, a little issue there. Okay. So sorry, I'm not sure what's happening there. Let me just, anyway, if you need more information about it, please contact either Megan Motko or Shula. Sorry, I had her name incorrect there. Something is happening to my computer. I am so sorry. Okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing. I was pretty much done talking anyway. Ben, if you wanted to share the slides, if you can start from after that slide, we can maybe switch this over. I don't know what was happening there. So okay? I do apologize. I was going to introduce you both.
I saw. I'll get it. Sorry.
Sorry, that was a bit abrupt. Of course, I said before this started, everything should go smoothly, and I basically jinxed us. So that is clearly my fault.
Sorry.
I can actually pull up the screen and just do it that way, just without sharing. Oh,
good enough.
All right. So Ben Baumer is an associate professor in the statistical and data science program at Smith College. He's the co-author of The Sabermetric Revolution, Modern Data Science with R, and the second edition of Analyzing Baseball Data with R. He has received the Waller Education Award from the ASA section on Statistics and Data Science Education, the Significant Contributor Award from the ASA section on Statistics in Sports, and the Contemporary Baseball Analysis Award from the Society of American Baseball Research. His research interests include sports analytics, data science, statistics and data science education, statistical computing, and network science. And then if you want to move the next slide ahead there, and then Katherine Kinnaird is the Claire Booth Luch Assistant Professor of Computer Science and Statistical and Data Sciences at Smith College. I apologize if I said that incorrectly. She is a computational researcher working on the intersection of machine learning, mathematics, and cultural analytics. Kinnaird has been involved with the Workshop for Women in Machine Learning, the American Mathematical Society's Committee on Education, and the Women in Music Information Retrieval Workshop. And so with that, I will let them take it away.
All right. Thank you, Lee, and thanks to everyone who's here. I'm going to put a link to the slides that we're going to use in the chat now, and I'm going to switch over to this other screen. So hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, great. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see so many familiar names, if not faces, on this webinar. We're going to walk you through a paper that Katie and I contributed to that was recently published in JSDSE entitled Integrating Data Science Ethics into an Undergraduate Major. It's a case study based on our work here at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. So I think the intro to this actually comes from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, whose undergraduate data science education report from 2018 states right up front that the potential consequences of the ethical implications of data science cannot be overstated. So we see this as a big deal. And what we're going to talk about first is why do we need to teach data science ethics? So I'm going to share with you like a couple quick anecdotes that will hopefully, try to motivate some of this. So this is a tweet from someone who is recalling seeing someone present a paper, I think, about building AI to identify gang members. And someone in the audience asked the presenter, who is a computer scientist at Harvard, maybe this isn't such a good idea. Maybe there are some potential misuses for this technology. And the person's response was, I'm just an engineer. So I think for us, this kind of speaks to what we're trying to fight against, a kind of complacency, libertarianism, nihilism, I don't know what the right term is. But the sort of belief that like this isn't your problem to worry about, which we don't agree with. And we're trying to get our students to not think about these problems this way. So here's the second example of the kinds of things that I think are helpful to talk about with students. And the big point here is this idea that algorithms reflect the biases of their creators. So this is an article from the New Yorker about some researchers at, I think it was Stanford, I could be getting that wrong, who had created a so-called gaydar, that is an AI that would take a picture of your, or look at a picture of your face and return a probability as to whether they thought you were gay or not. And I think it's sort of, it's obvious to me, sort of like what would be bad about this, maybe not obvious to everyone. But in the article, the author digs a little deeper and gets at this question of, what is our responsibility towards these algorithms that we build? And so the author says, it's hard to imagine a more contentious project than programming ethics into our algorithms, right? So being proactive about actually putting your own ethics into the algorithm. But their point is to do otherwise, however, would allow algorithms to monitor themselves, and that's to invite the quicksand of moral equivalence. And so again, at this idea of kind of like, this isn't our problem to solve, which I think we reject. So getting back to the National Academy of Sciences report, they did talk specifically about ethics. They say that ethics should be woven into the curriculum because of its importance from the beginning and throughout. We'll talk a little bit about how we're doing that at Smith in this webinar. And finally, that the data science community should adopt a code of ethics, and such a code should be affirmed by members of professional societies, aka the ASA. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like later on. All right, so we've been doing this for several years now. And part of what we talk about a little bit in the paper is sort of like, how is it going? And I think the thing that we've learned, I mean, this is a very limited study, low power study for sure. But one of the takeaways is that students don't find the introduction of data science ethics into the curriculum to be, that's not a problem for them, right? At least here at Smith, most of our students are either interested in that or sort of not put off by that. It's at worst not a distraction. But most students see it as an enhancement. I think it's an opportunity for them to like engage with their major, but also the connections between their major to things that are going on in their lives and society across campus and in their other classes. So this is a good thing. Here's further testament to that. I think I saw Dave Rakov's name on the list. So hi, Dave. This is a picture of you. This is a student group called Smithies in SDS, and they held a data science day. I think this is a couple of years ago now. And they chose, like, one of the topics that they decided was important about data science was data ethics. And they held a little booth here. And you can see Dave interacting with a couple of the students there. Okay, so in thinking about, so we talked about sort of like why data science ethics is important and why we need to address it. What is it? I think the first point that we want to make is that data science ethics is not necessarily the same thing as statistical ethics. I think when we talk about ethics in statistics, we're often talking about things like how to lie with statistics, which I hear people describe it as the most popular book in the history of statistics. I don't like to think that's true, but maybe it is. You know, the Belmont report, which deals with human subjects research, obviously reproducibility and replicability continue to be a problem of interest. So I think we don't mean to suggest that any of these problems don't still exist. These are still ethical questions in statistics. But I think what is different is some of these other things. And I think in particular, this focus on algorithmic bias. You know, and so this is the idea of bias that occurs when different groups of people are treated differently by algorithms and how damaging and harmful that can be. So we're thinking about this as these are new ethical areas that are informed by longstanding ethical principles, but are distinct in the way that computers, the internet, and databases have transformed the way we live. Okay, so thinking then about what are the learning goals? What are we actually trying to achieve here? And in the paper, we get into the Bloom's taxonomy way of thinking about such things. These are the learning goals that we wrote to assess the ethical implications to society of database research, analyses, and technology in an informed manner, and to use resources such as professional guidelines, institutional review boards, and published research to inform ethical responsibilities. So there's a bit to unpack here, but to me, it's two different and related things. And so the first part is being able to recognize when ethical questions arise in the context of data science work. And you know, as an instructor, I think you can get a lot closer to that by simply informing students about some of these examples that we've talked about today, but there's many, many others, to raise awareness, right? To make sure that they understand that this is something that they need to think about and to learn to identify when it happens. But I think the second part is that this is the sort of higher level Bloom part. So what can you do about it? What can you say about it? You know, can you, like, yes, you can reflect about your feelings about such, you know, an event or whatever, but can you then take ideas that have been published out there, guidelines, and try to contextualize the actions of specific actors and maybe make a judgment? You know, did this particular person behave ethically when they did X in the context of Y? And I think that's sort of a higher level skill that we get to later in students' career, like in the capstone course. Okay, so in the paper, we describe 6 different modules that fit in a variety of different statistics and data science courses. Today, Katie is going to walk us through a module that she put together about copywriting music, which touches on, well, I'll let her explain. So Katie, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So I'm going to describe this module on copywriting music. First, I'm going to tell you some of the logistics, and then we'll get into what are the ethical pieces that it touches on. So the main activity is a debate, and the debate is, should there be an academic license for music data in particular? So before class, students are, Ben, can you advance? Sorry, before class, students are assigned to a side. So either there should be an academic license or there shouldn't be. And they individually prepare a position paper. they are barred from consulting with each other. They can share resources, but they can't actually discuss a paper. So they're very individual before, and then the beginning, like 5 to 7 minutes of class, the two groups split off and kind of share their strategy, and that's the first time that they work together as a group. And then during class, it's a structured debate. There are time limits for introducing new arguments, and a back and forth. So just in this logistical structure, students experience balancing individual brainstorming and interaction with primary source materials, and then coming together as a group and trying to sort of quickly scaffold. So it does require that the students interact with the materials directly. But then the sort of what's in this debate. So in the field of music information retrieval, there's a growing divide between access and development in terms of music. So corporate research labs have lots of money and lots of storage power and can access things that would require money, versus in academic environments, not so much. So there's a famous data set known as the Million Song data set. That is $1 million data set, because each song is about $1. And so if you're working somewhere like Spotify or Apple Music or Pandora, you may have more access to music. I think this also pushes on for students something really tangible, right? Music ownership has changed dramatically from when I was buying CDs to now, where we essentially like lease music through platforms like Spotify. And so this idea of ownership is actually a moving target for students. And so this idea of listening to a song is not the same as owning a song, and interacting at a research level with an artifact like a piece of music is different, again, than listening to it. And then we also can think about how to compare and contrast access at a research university that might have more money compared to a liberal arts college. And then we can also get into other ethical issues. How do we protect artists, especially small artists? We're not, maybe students aren't as worried about protecting, Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber, but they might be more interested in protecting a local artist. And how do copyright laws kind of work to protect, and it's sort of in that work, differ from protecting privacy, like HIPAA or FERPA, which also students have some interaction with. It also pushes students to consider the difference between right and wrong, however they want to define that as morality, and also the intersection of capitalism with all of these pieces. And by structuring this as a debate, students have to go a little bit beyond yes or no. They have to really interact with the primary sources. They have to interact now with law and law's definition of right and wrong, as well as sort of morality. And then also just thinking about how money might change access. And that also sort of fits broader, like more broadly into thinking about diversity and inclusion work. Like, what does access mean? What can you overcome or not with money? It's really fun. I will say this is one of 2 debates in the course. And when I share with people in music information retrieval that this is one of the things I have students debate, it is met with a groan, because this is something that we all debate, I think, every time we meet at a conference. So this is not a settled issue in the research field, and it's selected intentionally because this is a really gray area. It's really an area that professionals wrestle with, and so students get to be part of the mess a little bit. This is not, there's no secret answer, there's no great reveal at the end of like, and now here's the true answer. And so I think students also really appreciate that what we do with a lot of these modules aren't quite settled issues, and showing them that unsettling is really important. Okay, so what else have we been up to?
Yeah, I just want to add that, so there's a link here, which maybe I'll drop in the chat as well, that contains the supplementary materials for the paper that includes all the detail so Katie walked through one of the 6, but there are 6. I also want to address a question that Marion asked in the Q&A. So are these modules a standalone data? So they're not standalone. At Smith, we don't have a standalone data ethics course. This is the sort of weaving into the curriculum aspect of it. So each module has different courses in which it may or may not be appropriate, but it's not a standalone data ethics course. Okay. So some late-breaking changes. So we have a new course that's called SDS 100, Reproducible Scientific Computing with Data, which relates to this goal. And Katie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so SDS 100 has a couple pieces to it. It is a co-requisite to a student's first course in stats and data science. So whether they're taking introductory to data science first and then intro stats, or they're taking intro stats, or they took AP stats, they will also take this course. This is a lab course. And it has a couple pieces, but the one unit is learning to reason about ethical practices in data science. And what this provides, so Ben is showing you our soon to be completed website.
It's still summertime.
It's yeah, we're working on it. So yeah, this is debuting in the fall. We'll have 9 sections of it, or 30 students each. So about 270 students will be engaging in this class. But leading up to, there are 2 weeks where we discuss ethics. And the goal of this class is to lay a sort of a uniform foundation for students to start thinking about ethics and to start thinking about these ideas of having ethical codes. But it's the idea that we want to really, in that first class, in that first interaction with our major, set up that ethics is part of our major, and that we want students to immediately start thinking through that lens, as opposed to doing the stats first or doing the data science first and then adding ethics later. We really are trying to start that right at the beginning of the major. And also, by putting this discussion of ethics in that first class, we actually create more equity around access to ethical frameworks for all students, so that students don't have to take, you know, a whole lot of classes to have some of that ethical framing. It's that really that first class in SES, they will be encountering these messy questions really early on.
Yes. And they'll pick up this thread, well, so it'll be woven throughout, but especially at the end in the capstone course. All right, I'm looking at the clock. We have like 5 minutes left, is that correct, Lee? Okay. So
Yes.
I'm gonna, I wanna make sure we have time for questions. I'm gonna maybe just quickly flip through some resources. If you're thinking about, you know, teaching data science ethics, where do you start? There's several books here. Kathy O'Neill's perhaps the most well-known, although perhaps also the most dated. Data feminism is something that we've used in a couple different courses. Algorithms of oppression, automating inequality. There are movies, videos and movies. So this is a video from Joy Bulamwini. There's also a link here to the Gender Shades Project, which contains more information and research about some of Joy's efforts. There's a full-length documentary called Coded Bias that goes in depth into Joy's work and the work of others. Conferences such as the Data for Black Lives conference, which I think is happening in New York City this year, sometime in the fall. And Katie, do you want to talk about FACT?
Yeah, so FACT is part of the ACM universe now. It's the Conference on Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency. It's really, it started as a machine learning conference, but has really expanded. And one of the things that I love about this conference is it really centers on interdisciplinary work. One of the first papers I saw there was a paper given by a lawyer and a computer scientist, almost as a translation back and forth. But I think there's a number of papers here that are quite accessible to students. So if you're looking for kind of what's happening in the field now, or some more current issues that you want to bring forward, I think FACT is a great place to look. And a lot of the papers, especially because of the pandemic, have videos attached to them. So you can get kind of a trailer.
Cool. I want to mention, so in addition to the 6 modules that we laid out, there's another effort called the Integrated Ethics Labs, which has a similar program of kind of presenting teachable material. And then algorithm fairness teachable unit. This is something that one of Katie's students put together, and you can read about this on GitHub through that link there. I'm going to just briefly mention that, we talked about this code of ethics question at the beginning. To the best of my knowledge, there are many different codes of ethics, but not one that we've all sort of signed on to. I've listed a couple of them here, and I do find these helpful to just, again, to get students kind of thinking more concretely about some of the stuff. Okay, so there's a link to the paper that we wrote, and thank you very much. We will now take your questions.
All right, I put a note in the chat. Someone mentioned that there may be an issue with participants being able to chat, and I'm actually not sure I can fix that. However, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. So, and a couple of people have already asked some questions that have been answered. So if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I can attempt to unmute you and you can just ask your question directly. And while people are kind of working through that, I did have a question. Have you guys put much thought into assessment for all of this? Like, I struggle with that. When I do include ethics, how do I assess that piece of it, or do I assess it at all? I don't know. Have you thought about that or dealt with that?
Yeah, it's an ongoing struggle, like assessment in general. I can tell you that when I've taught the capstone project, the capstone course, I do ask them to write an essay, like a 3 to 5 page essay. And so that's one way of assessing it. I also ask them to include an ethical statement about the capstone project that they're working on, so that they can, again, sort of practice interpreting ethical constraints within the context of a real world problem. We don't have department level assessment yet.
Okay. No, and I just meant sort of in the course, it is, I don't know, it's difficult for me to assess an ethical argument, just personally, because it's not my background. So.
Totally. I think a lot of us struggle with that. And
yeah.
Yeah.
There, at the moment, doesn't appear to be any questions. Feel free to use the raise hand feature. I'm assuming everybody can use that. I'm never going to say that that things are going to go smoothly, because everything is technically not going smoothly.
There's a question.
Is anyone using city module completion for assessment? I'm not familiar with that.
Not in our department.
I think this refers to where I've encountered this is through the IRB training. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, if this person is asking about existing city modules, I haven't used those for assessment. I have used that as sort of a barrier to entry, to make sure that students have had that training.
Okay. All right.
Again, I think this
I
gets
am
at,
not. Oh, sorry.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think it gets at this distinction that we sort of highlighted earlier between sort of what ethics are in the context of an IRB versus what ethics are in the context of data science writ large.
Okay, so we have another question. Are your students interested in the extent to which we all sign away some of our privacy when we click accept on apps, especially those to know our location? So I taught an intro to data science class at Brown. It was a first year seminar. And as part of that, they read Weapons of Mass Destruction. And I sort of hoped that by the end, that they would be kind of unnerved by this, and they weren't. And now I'm afraid to ask students if they're unnerved by it, because I felt I failed, because I sort of wanted them at the end of the semester to agree that like everyone needed a tin hat and like to be a little bit more suspicious. And they were like, that's fine. So I personally have not asked because I'm afraid of knowing the answer. I don't know if Ben has another.
I have had similarly mixed reactions. So I think this is an important question. I think it's real, as a like old person, this is an interesting question to me. I have had students who have had some kind of like aha moments, like, oh, like they really don't realize like that they're being tracked to the extent that they are. But they also have a different generation. And I've also had students who are just like, yeah, I don't care. This is just like how I live and have always lived. So, but I do think it's, again, I think just, it's like the first level is like raising awareness, right? Like making sure that they do understand that they are doing that. If they choose not to care, then, you know, so be it. But yeah. All right, I see another question from Amelia. Hi, Amelia. With regard to the IRB issue, do you talk about the difference in ethical standards between things done at higher ed institutions and those done by companies? That's an excellent question. Yes. So I think the issue that you raise is really important to think about, right? Because the truth is that a lot of these projects are conducted not at higher education institutions where we have that kind of oversight from an IRB, but by private companies that have no such oversight. I guess, so I think that Kathy O'Neill is now part of some kind of like algorithmic auditing consulting group. Do you know anything about that, Katie?
Yeah, she started one. She started, I think, a consulting firm, but I don't know any details beyond that she has one.
Yeah. But I think that as this sort of field develops, if something were to arise in that space for kind of like third-party auditing of private companies, that would be a really interesting development.
I think that's all the questions at this point. We will make sure that the recording gets posted and those links to the different resources, or we'll make sure those are available to you guys. Hopefully you're able to get them from the chat. I apologize that people were not able to chat back apparently. And just a quick, great talk, Katie and Ben, much needed and appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope everyone is, oh, a quick question about, can we share the slides with colleagues?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And I did see a question from Rick that it was following up on the tracking question. In other words, is it unethical if we told somebody it's okay to track us? And maybe that's a question for another time, but I just wanted to make sure we actually saw that question.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll say that I think that's up to you, Rick. I think Katie said something to this effect, that it's like there's not a lot of answers out here. Like there are truths and facts and untruths, and there are frameworks to think about things, but there's not a lot of clear answers.
Okay.
So I'm also trying to make sure I'm typing as much of our responses as possible for the record.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Hope everybody has a great end of their summer. I'm sorry I have to say end to summer as it's fast approaching. But we will see you again in September, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a nice afternoon.